live. And here we go. 3, 2, 1, you're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show. And as you can see behind me, we're going to be talking about a little bit about buffalo and horses. And we got a great story all cooked up for my great co-host, Mr. David Null, Hawkeye Two Feathers. Thank you for coming.
Greetings and blessings, everyone. This wonderful Tuesday is 10:05 p.m. on the Eastern Coast, and we welcome you as always, and we always greet you with the love and honor of the Great Spirit, and hope you're doing well. And thank you, Robert, for having me again. This is show number 57.
57.
Oh my! Remember now, folks, we've been doing this for over a year now. Just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah.
That's how crazy we are.
Well, we've been doing it for a little longer than a year, but I mean, we've been
52 weeks is a year, so I'm just saying.
I'm just saying is we missed a few weeks here and there because I got a call and things like that, but for the most part, it's pretty much every week as a regular schedule. I think this is a great show. We keep up with it every week. We always come up with something new. We have card draws and we have interesting facts. I think the myths and legends has really caught on. People I've seen people leave comments and send me emails and say how much they love this show and they're learning so much from it. So like I said, I'm hoping that maybe we can get some interesting guests on here too, eventually, someday, but for the most part, we're it. Good duo team, and we are continuing on. But for tonight, I'm going to be talking about buffalo. Usually I've been talking about chiefs and Indian wars and tribes and things like that. But tonight I'm going to keep it a little bit light, because of the way the thing is it's coming Christmas time, and I thought about the Indians and Thanksgiving and how I could because they didn't have a Thanksgiving sorta, but they did have what they and they didn't have a Christmas either, not until the white man came and then introduced them to the new religion. Right. Unless you can tell me otherwise. Now you're going to tell me something I didn't know, aren't you? But anyway, for the most part, I know they couldn't have had a Christmas because there was no Christmas to celebrate.
Yeah, Santa Claus just couldn't fly over the Atlantic back then. His reindeer just couldn't handle it.
That's right. But what did they celebrate? They celebrated the life-giving buffalo coming, and the best times to hunt the buffalo were in the fall, come October through the winter. The winter was the best times to hunt the buffalo. And I got this book. It's a big thick book. There's a lot of stuff in here, boys and girls. There was this cool cover on it, better than just showing you the book. This was called The Mystic Warriors of the Plains by Thomas E. Males.
What a name, right? E. Males.
Oh yeah, email. Thomas E. Males.
I was like, what?
Anyway, how cool is that? Who would have thought it? I never even thunk it. Just opened it, and we're going to start out with the buffalo because we've talked about the horses and we talked about the buffalo before. But this was a whole new look on it from this book. And
say hi to everybody before you get started.
Yes.
Is there anybody in the house yet?
Yes. Michelle Can-Am Free, Susie Q, Mark Spark is in the house. I was just kind of waiting a little bit there. I think they're all over at Ryder Lee's. He had a really good guy on.
I can't see the chat. but normally
Yeah.
you kind of break out and do a little thing. And so I
Oh
figured before
yeah.
you got too long-winded, maybe you could say hi to everybody. But
Oh yeah, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Don't worry. I don't forget our wonderful audience, you know. But anyway, I came across this book and it's got all kinds of things in there, and we're going to go through some of this. Since we did religions, it's got a bunch on religion, so I skipped that because we did that just recently. It's got about medicine, spiritual, supernatural beliefs, uh, personal qualities of the Indian. Um, it's got a little bit of everything. Social customs, uh, manner of daily life. I mean, you know, it goes into a lot of stuff. Bows and arrows, quivers. I know we did hunting equipment at one point in time. Hairstyles. And we know that each tribe had a different hairstyle, that is for sure.
hairstyle of the rich and famous.
Well, yeah, you know, I know their difference of jewelry and headdresses. We kind of talked a little bit about that. They're different in clothing, you know, throughout the tribes, stuff like that. You know, so this is pretty cool book. But in order to have clothing and stuff like that, you got to have buffalo, because that was their mainstay. They really didn't have cloth, you know, like achievement marks. That's kind of a cool one. Quill work and bead work. They were really big on beads, you know. Remember before the white man came, they used shells and painting. And here's one about painting and art and stuff. They were real creative. Of course, you know, not having to go to work and have a job, you know. And then they had their wampums, you know, the belts that they made to tell stories and account for things like that. So as those things came along and they decorated things, you know, their history was woven into those fabrics, painted on their teepees. But tonight we're going to be talking about the buffalo, and the buffalo are really important to the tribes for the most part. And there was buffalo, you know, all over the place. I mean, the whole United States was covered with buffalo, believe it or not. I mean, most people don't realize that buffalo, uh, you know, when we've been growing up, they've been buffalo of the plains, but the buffalo of the east were a woodland buffalo, and that woodland buffalo was larger, believe it or not, larger than the ones on the plains. It's hard to believe that, but it was. And can you imagine meeting a buffalo? I mean, have you been around buffalo?
I've seen it. Yeah, when I was out west, I saw them up close, and there have been a few buffalo that have been imported here into the South. But
Yeah.
seeing, you know, having to stop the truck and wait for a buffalo to get out of the middle of the road, it was just, you know, that was an experience.
Yes. Yes. Oh, thank you, Susie Q. We got people who are, we got, you know, one of those trolls in our chat. Thank you so much. She is right on top of that. I didn't even notice that. Anyway, yeah, as we get more popular, we got to deal with more trolls. But anyway, so the thing is I know we got buffalo out here in the Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and they're huge. You can drive right, like you said, you drive right by them, and they're in the road. You take pictures and things like that. But then there's, you know, if they were bigger, holy cow, that's a big buffalo. But by the time the white man got here, they literally killed them all off in very short order. And by, like, what was it, 1804 or 1812, the last one on the east side of the Mississippi River was killed off. So they didn't last too long once the settlers got going. Between, you know, the hides, you know, because like I was saying before, they were paying the Indians big money for the hides of all the critters. And the Indians were glad to get the critters because they were getting guns and they were getting pots and pans and, white man stuff because they had no money. It's kind of hand in hand kind of thing. And I imagine they got a good price for the buffalo hide too. They didn't think nothing of it. But then when they were all gone, now they got nothing to trade and they got nothing to eat. It's kind of now they're dependent on the white man. And get a job, man. And they sold their land off too. So sad ending to the Indians, I guess. Let's see, where am I going for? But then there was also another buffalo. So there was the big woodland buffalo on the east. There was the plains buffalo in the middle. And then there's the buffalo that lived, which was a smaller buffalo that lived in the west, like in California area. And I found these out here, and I can't remember where they're at, but I will find them as we go through here. Well, anyway, we're going to start out. I haven't seen anybody pull in yet, so we're going to just start off. And it says here, if God was a creator and overseer of life, if the morning star, moon, and Mother Earth combined their talents to give birth and hope to the Indian, if the sun was the dispatcher of wisdom and warmth, then the buffalo was the tangible and immediate proof of them all. For out of the buffalo came everything necessary for daily life, including his religious use of the intermediary through which the Great Spirit could be addressed, and but by which the Spirit often spoke to them. In short, the buffalo was life to the Plains Indian, until the white man's goods and ways first eliminated and then replaced the animal. Isn't that amazing?
And then, and their religion then.
Yeah, and their religion. So literally,
and their way of life, and it,
yeah,
because the buffalo was so important. When the white man came and the buffalo was gone, so was their traditions. I mean, it wasn't just the buffalo. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So anyway, the Indians waited around, and I mean, we don't have much history, put it this way. We don't have much history for the Indians before the buffalo came. Very little. Because even the first white man to visit a lot of those tribes in the north and the plains, the horse was already there, so that the tribes had already established the horse thing, so that they already had horses. But up until the 1600s, there were no horses, and they had had to hunt the buffalo in different ways. There was a lot fewer Indians out on the plains because it was hard to move their equipment. It'd be, buffalo hide weighed a lot. It says here, and then the Indians did things to help the buffalo too. Regular intervals to promote new growth. The grass was always inducement to the herds, and was common for some of the tribes of the northern to burn off certain sections of the plains each spring. Here's another one. If a child's name included the word buffalo, it is believed that child would be especially strong and would mature quickly. And if it didn't do those expectations, et cetera, et cetera. But the buffalo was his supernatural helper. Holy men who saw the buffalo in a vision during which they were called to practice of medicine would seek thereafter to commune with the Great Spirit through the buffalo. The Indians of each band sought to assist their process by calling buffalo, and the delay, and then any delay in their appearance would, of course, intensify the calling procedures to amplify medicine rights, because, you set your clock by them. Buffalo should be here next week, and supper will be served, guys. If not, we're going to run out of food soon. Buffalo often licked themselves. In the process, they swallowed some of their hair. Over the years, the hair sometimes formed into perfectly round balls, and that were about 2 inches in diameter. Such balls were a great find and immediately became buffalo calling item for ritual use, believe it or not. The Blackfeet had special mystic rites for calling their buffalo in. The medicine man person employed the rites had good fortune to own one or more of the unusual stones called buffalo stones. These were stones that they found that were shaped or looked like buffalo. And they used these stones to, summon the buffalo. Sometimes a Sioux warrior calling buffalo they would have a buffalo hide hanging and decorate it and call the buffalo. All the Plain tribes had special songs that they sang that would make the buffalo approach their camp areas, because if the buffalo came close to their camp, that meant they didn't have to lug all that meat back too far. And so getting a herd close to your area was very important. Excuse me. The holy men of the Sioux, the Sobonis, and the Pawnees used buffalo skulls in rituals designed to enhance the herds, and the carcass of a first animal slain in a large hunt was always sacrificed to the Great Spirit. Let's see. Remember, we talked about a guy named George Catlin. He was one of the first guys to go out west, like right after Lewis and Clark. And he and his painter, he documented all this stuff. He wrote about it, documented it, and shortly after, all the Indians died. So, changed a lot of stuff out there. He gives a vivid description of the buffalo calling dance by the Mandan men. The dance lasted 3 days, and with new dancers consistently taking the place of those who became too exhausted. While 15 men danced at a time, the places of those who became exhausted, they were wearing huge masks made of entirely of buffalo heads. The only change when the guy fell down and he was too exhausted, they dragged him off, and then they pretended to skin the buffalo meat in a ritual, afterwards, and then a new guy would take his place. The Hidatsa tribe had a calling dance in which 6 elderly men played the parts of buffalo bulls. After dancing for a time, the imitation of the bulls, they tasted dishes of boiled corn and beans. Following this, empty bowls were given to them, and each man acted as though he was eating wonderful buffalo. Yeah. So even pretending, we talk about meditation and envisioning, things like that. Remember, and see, they were doing that already. Look, I can just imagine eating the buffalo meat. Yum, yum, and even though I don't have any, my manifestation will come true. You know what I'm saying?
Build it and they will come.
Yeah, exactly. If I imagine it enough,
and here's the thing, and that people don't understand that white men got here in 15 something 16, but these types of things had been going on for thousands of years. These traditions of manifesting and imagining and stuff like that, without any kind of white man's interpretations or influences. You know what I mean? Or Chinese. So there are a lot of times where some of these things are forgotten. Well, like, well, what do you mean? It's like a new age thing, and but it ain't new age, it's old age.
Yeah.
The elders knew about this stuff.
Well, exactly. And the events, a lot of this changed when they got the horses, because it says, it talks about first, transportation probably was monumental, and enormous quantities of meat and heavy hides were not easy to carry from the hunting areas to the campsites. Second, it was much safer to hunt in one's own domain, because of other tribes and enemies, would be out there. You go too far from your native land area where you were, that you get in the next tribe's area, and then you got a war going on. You're eating his buffalo. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, there was some tribes that were not so good. They didn't have horses, or they didn't have their own area to hunt, and sometimes they lost more warriors hunting for the buffalo from other tribes than they did from their own buffalo, or the buffalo hunt. Okay, no one knows how many buffalo there were in North America before white men came. Most estimates for peak period of the Plains Indian occupation range from 60 to 75 million head. As of late 1830, white hunters guessed that there were 40 million left, which is still quite a few.
And what was the total?
At one point, it should have been 75 million. It's a lot of buffalo. Although large herds lived on the plains, smaller ones also ranged from northern Georgia to Hudson Bay, from the Appalachians to the Rockies and beyond. The buffalo of North America were not all the same color or size. Plains type, with which everyone is familiar, was not the largest. The wood buffalo, found in small herds in eastern parts of the United States and Canada, which some called the Pennsylvania buffalo, was slightly larger. Although it grazed on the open prairies in the summer, it generally sought the protection of the woods in the winter. Other types was less common mountain buffalo of the Rockies and the Pacific Coast region. It was smaller but more fleet than the plains bison. Unfortunately, both the wood and the mountain buffalo became extinct before scientists could learn much about them.
Ain't that a shame?
Yeah, well, like I said, as soon as the white man moved in, ooh, look, buffalo, we'll just shoot one, then two, then three, then four. Well,
Well, they did the same thing to the elk.
Yep.
I mean, it's a wonder that the deer survived, but
yeah,
the elk didn't. I mean, they killed off all the elk in the Appalachians, and it wasn't until about 25 years ago that they reintroduced elk back into the Smoky Mountains, up around Cades Cove in that area up there.
Yeah.
But at one point there weren't any elk anymore, along with the buffalo. So,
that's right. Hey, Elderberry's in the house. Lucky Stone is in the house. Thank you for coming. But yeah, that's the thing. It's just like in Europe. We always talk about, make fun of the California people as they move out of California and they go to different states. And then they bring their ways with them, right?
California ways with them.
Yes. But the Europeans kind of did the same thing. They came here with good intent, as we've been talking about, like the Pilgrims and the people who wanted freedom and all of that good stuff. But they came here, and what did they do? They killed off everything that they saw until it was extinct, pretty much. I mean, they did the same thing, because like in Europe, there wasn't much of anything left, was there? I mean, where's the buffalo in Europe? Everybody was farming and working. You didn't have to worry about a tiger or a bear getting you, because they shot them all off or killed them all off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, look at England. There's nothing there. I mean, you're not going to get and the deer. Remember, the king, you couldn't kill a deer without the king's permission, or it was because otherwise people would be out there hunting all the deer down until they were extinct. In some ways, you got to give credit to the king for saying, hey, wait a minute, keep killing the deer, those are my deer, don't kill them, because all the poor people would go out there and kill a deer until there weren't no more. And that would be pretty easy to do, considering there's a lot of people in England on an island where the deer can't escape to nowhere.
Right. And here's the thing about it wasn't just the people who came over, but it was the Germans who came over. It was now up in the Appalachians, there are certain places where there are German communities, and I'm not picking on the Germans, but the Irish, and they brought the fiddle, and a lot of the Appalachian folk music is kind of, sort of Irish related,
Oh yeah.
and so there these different immigrants from the different countries they absolutely brought their own traditions, and a lot of them are still seen today after, hundreds of years of, their first immigrants who came over,
Oh yeah,
and they weren't necessarily bad, I mean, of course,
No.
they brought whiskey with them. The Irish had to have their whiskey, but
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not they came with bad intent. They
no,
came with good intent. It was just when they seen so many, they went, "Ooh, well, there's 40 million buffalo. Let's go kill a few.
well,
Let's have dinner."
think about this now. The Irish, I can't remember when the potato famine was, but they were basically starving anyway. I mean, if all you got to eat is taters,
Yeah.
And if you were in England or over there, and the king owned the deer, and you and your family were starving, and then you come over to America, and there's all these buffalo, there's all these elk, and you go, oh my God. And there ain't nobody to stop us from shooting them.
Mhm.
You
In
know,
fact, they were promoting it. Go
right?
out and
And
shoot them.
because
Shoot
then they
everything.
could, make jerky and send it back across. They could skin the deer, and they were selling the hides, and there was commerce. So these people that came from nothing
Yep.
to a land that was very plentiful, the land of
Yes.
milk and honey. They had to
Yeah.
work for it, but to the point though. So imagine someone has starved all their life and comes over and sees all these buffalo, and nobody stops them.
Yeah.
Like you said, and they're encouraged. So the mindset, you say, well, where was their mindset? Well, they were just greedy and whatever. No, they were like, oh my God, look what we got here.
Yeah. There's so many of them,
And it
and
got out of hand.
they're gonna pay me to, bring in the hides of these things. I'm gonna go out and do what I can to get rid of them. Well, not that I want to get rid of them, but I got an opportunity right now to make money,
Yep.
just like the Indians did. They didn't have money, and so you got thousands and thousands of Indians who wanted to have things, and they used that as money. So, like I says, it was one of these things. Some early explorers believed that the herds made long seasonal migrations, but that wasn't quite so. George Catlin, who went, or Catlin, whatever, went west in 1832 to study, and he painted the Indians. He also seemed to enjoy the travel. Okay, whatever. He wrote, he reviewed this, and he said the buffalo, the buffalo of Saskatchewan never wintered in Texas, but he did note that they might move and migrate certain places, but they didn't go that far. But to the Indians, it seemed like they moved to one area to the other, you know what I mean? But the buffalo were probably just moving from the mountain, winter area where they could eat, that had less snow, to a summer grazing area, and the plains were big. It's like a vast sea of nothingness where the grass was growing good and tall, you're
Well,
going to go out there.
in nature, there is migration of
Yes.
all different kinds of species.
Yep.
There's migration of butterflies that go down to Mexico this time of year. What is it? The monarch buffalo that go buffalo monarch butterfly.
Yeah, it says here that
But
that
all the birds have moved out of this area, and I live in the south, but they've moved even further south.
well, exactly. They went to
And
where it's warm.
so their migration is common. So the migration of buffalo, where some people go, well, I don't know, they just stayed in one place. Oh, but no, they didn't. They migrated like the rest of Mother Nature does. I mean, it's common, or at
Yep.
least it was.
Absolutely. Nina is in the house. Nina the Mystic's in the house. Don't forget to go over to her channel and sign up. She's going to have a big giveaway. So we're all going to get over there and check that out. Nina, put your link in the comments there, the section here and in the comments later on. Okay, so anyway,
Can I note something here?
Yes, go ahead.
Now white man went out and they just, killing the buffalo, for their hides, and they just let the meat rot. And then a few years later, there was a big thing about cows, and then it was the cattle drives. So they wasted the buffalo simply for their hides.
Yeah.
And then turned the business into cows.
Yeah.
Because the white men were familiar with cows. Cows came over with the Europeans. So, but they never thought to domesticate the buffalo. They just killed them all off and then went, oh, we got to feed people. So let's, turn cows out onto the prairie. And out on the prairie, it was made for the buffalo.
Yeah.
So it took more grazing because the cows were not suited for where the buffalo used to roam. So I just want to point that out that, the white man made a big mistake when they killed all the buffalo, not because they killed them all, but because then they tried to move cows in.
Well,
and they would have been better off to have domesticated the buffalo, is my point.
Well, the thing is those buffalo, now when I worked at the ranch, we had a herd of buffalo, and you could feed those buffalo almost nothing and they would get fat. And they could eat the shittiest grass, they could eat the shittiest hay, and they would stay nice and plump and fat. And in the winter, they look good. Man, you give them a little bit of grain and they're just roly-polies, Yeah, like you said, big difference between that and a cow. But buffalo are a lot more aggressive, harder control. They're very territorial. I mean, they're meant to be on the wild plains. They are wild, and they don't think nothing of attacking, where a cow is big and docile and kind of just looks at you like, whatever. You could do whatever you want to a cow and it's just going to mosey along, and it's a lot safer animal to have around. Put it that way. So there was, getting back with this, the rarest of all was the albino buffalo, and they varied from a dirty gray to a pale cream. Okay, so this is why I picked the buffalo for tonight, is because by October of a good year, all the buffalo were fat and the bulls were still moving with the herds. It was the best time for tribal hunting. The first days of the hunt were devoted to obtaining all the meat needed for winter. The chase for robes came later. Now, different buffalo were for different types of items. Put it that way. In November, the bulls left the herds. They gathered in small groups and remained away from the cows until breeding time. During this period, the hides from 4-year-old cows were taken. The hair was not prime, but the hides were just right for new lodges. So the thing was each time of the year was different sizes. In early like the bulls, they would get a bull and they didn't use the big part and the head part where it's all fuzzy, like they would cut it down the shoulders. You can see in the picture behind me, that part they would cut. They would cut this and use it for the hide, but this here was just too big and heavy and hairy to be used for much.
They used them for blankets and rugs.
Well, yeah, but that they had different they had used, there's cows and
Right.
different types of and different ages. There's things in here where each age of the buffalo. So here we go.
And
Large number of.
And
go ahead.
also, and I want to add also the time of year, because just like animals will shed hair in the summertime when it's too hot, they'll get, woollier in the wintertime because, so the hide would get thicker and their hair would get thicker in the wintertime and
Yes.
thin out in the spring. So, that also was a factor. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. In the early fall hunt, large number of motherless calves. The calves were deserted when the herd became, they chased the herd. The cows ran in the front, then the bulls, and then the calves in the end. So some of the cows got killed, and they abandoned their calves as soon as the hunters gave chase. They were usually in the lead of the stampeding herd. Bulls ran behind the cows, and the yearlings and calves brought up the rear. Some hunters claimed that the cows could run faster than any of the other buffalo in the herd, and for this reason were always in the lead. Let's see. As they passed the second year, this is where they get the horn thing. As they passed the second year, the horns continued to curve. 3-year-olds were known as curved horns because of their short, small, curved horns. Small built buffalo was the usual name applied for 4-year-olds, but they were also called 4-teeth. Robes were taken from these in January and February and were considered the best of all hides. They were not too thick and hairy, but was fluffy but silky and thick. Boys were taught that when robe hunters rode out into the herd, they were to look for particular or the small built ones. Both male and female, with trim and neat bodies whose coats of hair were like fine fur. At the age of 6, cows were known as big females, which meant they were mature animals. The bulls of this vintage were called horns, not cracked, because of their fine polished horns, which resulted from hours spent polishing them by rubbing against low-cut branches or trees by the riverbanks. Bulls pawed down sometimes sides washouts. Bull hides were skinned only to the shoulder and cut off, leaving behind the parts that covered the humps. To the skin, a mature bull, the Saboni boy learned how to lay the animal in a prone position and make the incision along the back, starting at a little above and behind the tips of the shoulder blades. Okay, when buffalo became old, some living beyond the age of 30 years, they shrank in size. The horns, especially those of the bulls, were cracked and craggly and homely. Old bulls congregated in lonely groups and remained that way and usually died of natural causes. Okay, there was also ones called the yellow ones, and most of them were females. They were natural sized buffalo with an odd color. Most were for robes. They were female, and they made yellow robes out of them, and they were rare. And a hunter with a proud to be able to present one to a prominent person. White or albino buffalo were even rarer, and a number of them were taken by bands. So few, it became a matter of historical record to be handed down from generation to generation. Only 3 were known by the Saboni tribe. Let's see. Another kind was known as the spotted ones. One white spot on the underside of the flanks. Had a small white spot on both legs or both hind legs, usually near the hooves. Only females were marked in this way. Small heads were also females. They were of ordinary size, but had small heads and very short horns. Okay. Weather permitting, in winter was a fairly simple task. The Indians could either hunt on horseback or use their snowshoes, which enable them to run over soft drifts. The buffalo being, having coarse hair and to protect them from the winter and the deep snow, they couldn't run very fast. And they frequently became exhausted from running in the deep snow. And with little danger to themselves, the Indians could run up to the buffalo and shoot them at their leisure. They could do this over frozen lakes or in summer when the herd was swimming across a wide river.
So imagine in the wintertime, it was almost, so they're in the snow, it's already cold. And so they don't even have to worry about skinning it right away because it's going to be preserved by the cold.
That's
So
right.
like, we got,
Refrigerator.
There's another one over there. We don't have to stop and dress this one out right now. We can, so how convenient that must have been in the
Yes.
wintertime,
Absolutely.
To run across the top of the snow and catch the buffalo. That must have been interesting just thinking about it,
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, having well, anyway, let's get back to this. Okay, so back in the day, they did a method called piskin. This is where they get they would make a big V like a trap, and they would herd the buffalo into the trap, usually over a cliff area where they would run them along a pathway and over the cliff where they would, die. These were areas, most of these places were left a mess. And after, once the buffalo could smell the dead buffalo, they wouldn't go near there. So you couldn't use it like over and over and over as a one-time use kind of thing, once a year maybe. But they did use these places over hundreds of years. It says it was called, or you could call it a buffalo jump, I guess. Most of these were located in the Blackfeet and Crow area in Montana, where they still find buffalo bones and arrows at the bottom of the cliff. Buffalo had poor vision, but a keen sense of smell and surprising speed when aroused. That was another thing. So like as big as that buffalo is, when I was at the ranch, you can see in this picture how big this buffalo is. But I tell you what, when they get going, they can jump a hell of a high fence. I mean, we had 9 and 10-foot fences, and them buffalo, if they got a little run to it, they could almost make it over that. It was amazing.
And they could run almost as fast as a horse.
Faster. Says here, when I get into the horse thing, I was going to talk about that. But they were saying that these buffalo would run, and you better have a fast horse because you're going to get runned over or whatever. But they only could take the swiftest and fleetest horses to chase the buffalo. Otherwise, it would outrun you. But these buffalo, like I said, that this is you can see this is summertime. They're shedding. This is not the time that they would be shooting a buffalo for most sakes. But here you got a big one, and the big bulls, they kind of move around slow and everything, and they're not afraid of nothing. As you can see, that one's probably a good one. When it's getting fall, you can see the leaves. He would make a nice coat there. But anyway, let's get on with this. Let's see here. We're almost to the horse thing. In the minds of Plains Indians, Between 1750 and 1875, the classic buffalo hunt was the summer chase. Hunting then was close to warfare, as it depends upon the horsemanship and courage. Cool nerves and sharp reflexes were required of horse and rider in both hunting and war. So the young brave trained his finest horses in the buffalo hunt until they became like extensions of his lower part of his body. It took months of hard work to ready a steady horse for the use of hunting and warfare, and not every steed could meet the requirements. Any buffalo in good condition could outrun a mediocre horse. An acceptable mount must be able to run down its quarry in a mile or less. Still, an untrained animal would shy and buck whenever it came close to a buffalo. It had to be taught to race through a confusion of beasts and up to an enraged bull while guiding its knee pressure alone, or guided by knee pressure alone. The hunter needed both hands free in war and the chase. In both instances, either let the reins, he let the rider let the reins drop of his horse's neck, or tuck them and loose around the ends around his belt and held them with his teeth, or locked them in the crook of his right arm. So the horses were trained for fine point for buffalo hunts and warfare. There you go.
And they didn't use saddles.
Yes they did, and no they didn't. So listen, so it gets here. Buffalo hunters stripped to the clout or to kraut the leggings at most to reduce their weight and free their movements. Frames, saddles, shields, and other extra gear were left behind at a selected site. Some hunters used padded saddles or buffalo robes tied on with a buffalo skin cinch. A hunter carried 6 or 7 arrows and his bow in his hand, or when using a gun, a few bullets in his mouth. Quivers were carried at the hunter's left side, or so the arrows could be quickly drawn. A heavy quirt was used to prod the horse. So there you go. Yeah, it's having, there we go. But yeah, to get the whole, that was the thing too, is so it says in the book here, and it's talking about different saddles and stuff that they had. But when you're on that buffalo hunt, you want all the speed you can get. You want your horse fleet of foot. You strip yourself down, you carry as few bullets and arrows as you need, and you go like crazy, man. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
Anyway, but here, to the victors belongs the buffalo liver. And when the chase had run its course, they jumped from their horses, cut it out, and ate it raw, seasoned with gall and still steaming with body heat and dripping in blood. These were bizarre but triumphant moments, and every boy remembered the last detail, that first crowning day when he dropped a buffalo to the ground, ate its liver, as if an adult capable as an adult with capabilities had been questioned until then. Such doubts moved a long ways away. Surely he was a man and ready to assume his place in the tribal hierarchy. Oh, there you go. There's Regine Hutchinson. Thank you for coming. Big Al, thank you for supporting Doug. Yes, Doug Stack. We're supporting Doug Stack this winter for Christmas. If you got any things, that will be in the description below, and go there. I will have it in after the show. But this winter we are trying to help Doug out. He's in hard times, trying to make it with his shop and his things, and working real hard at it. So that's our goal this winter. We can't support everybody, but this year we're gonna put our work behind Doug. So we're good for him. Yes. Let's see who else is in the house. Elderberry, Susie Q, Nina Mystic. Yes. Tomorrow, Hump Day message. Go check it out. S. Lee's in the house. My brains, the cliff, and my heart's the bitter buffalo, modest mouse. Okay. Anyway, and then the women, when they got back, the women would stretch the hides. They would dry them, make all the furs and things. They used every little bit of that buffalo. The sinew, they made their saddles from the rawhide, the sinews. They use it in braiding. They use it in leather straps, which they used to for braids and the horses and their robes, their food, everything. Their teepees, you name it, they had it. Okay, so now we're getting
bones were used for implements too. So
yes, the bones. It gives a whole bunch of pictures here. I'm sorry to have a whole bunch of stuff for you. Bone scrapers is with metal points, assuming she scraped the hides with the bones. And then they kind of smoked it out so they could use it. Buckskin was required for pliable items such as clothing, quivers, bonnets, thongs, soft pouches to produce skins and dressers, tanning. Some of the skins were brown, yellowed, or otherwise colored by smoking. Buffalo hide was by far the most important material available for tanning and was much too heavy for many uses. So from time to time, the hunters also brought deer, elk, moose, mountain sheep, beavers, antelope, mountain lions, coyotes, badgers, muskrats, and even rabbits. Elk, deer skins were the main used for clothing. A whole skin serves for the dress of a small girl, 2 skins for the dress of a woman, 2 skins for a man's shirt. Interesting, huh?
yep.
Let's see here. Let's move on. We're going to do horses. And then event of the horse revolutionized the patterns of the Plains Indians. But didn't come till the Spanish got here. People misunderstand this. And I want to stress this because there's so many people who have misinterpreted that the horse has always been here. But until that time, Indians were on foot. They had dogs to pull their travois. They had a walk. The tribes
Everywhere.
yes, they didn't move around like they
They
did once they.
that's why rivers were so important before the horse got there, because they did move by canoe and raft, but across country, nah, they had to
Yeah,
walk.
yeah, exactly. Plains Indians, they were not already doing so. It's a form enabled people. They were semi-nomadic, with small bands of Indian families moving out in intervals from fairly stationary villages to hunt buffalo and doing the buffalo, the piskins and the buffalo jumps. With the horse to carry them, their teepees, and their other possessions, they could follow the roving buffalo herds throughout the good weather months, and they could raid the enemy's horses and herds, etc. A few horses and mules were obtained by the settlements of the Indians in trade for goods around 1600. And during 1600, the horse migrated from, like in Texas, according to this map, and it migrated upwards through the plains, and it spread out like a tree. And so like the people of Washington, Montana and Washington didn't even really get their horses till about 100 years later. Can you imagine that? Horses were here for 100 years, and the people of Washington, it says here, didn't even get them till like the 1730s.
Right. So
And
there was a lot of horses in Mexico and New Mexico and Arizona, but they didn't migrate north.
yeah, exactly. And slowly but surely, but it depends. It's like this trading route went up towards like the Mandans, and the Mandans were like the central horse trading point. So the Sioux had the horses, and the Comanche, they got horses early on. And of course, it says here, Horses, Indians. Before 1650, the Ute, the Apache, and the Kiowa tribes were the first to put the horse to extensive use, and next were the Comanches. And through those Spaniards and original tribes, the horse was diffused to the Northern Plains Indians. And according to this, it went up to the Northern Plains and spread out. So like the horse didn't get to like Wisconsin areas until the 1770s. Didn't get to Canada till 1770. You know, just before the white man got there, literally. You know, they I mean, look at Lewis and Clark. They were they took that big trip through, and the horse had just gotten there before they did, almost. You know what I mean? Because they came through in like 18.
Horses with them for the first leg.
Yes,
and then
they
left
did.
them behind.
Yes, and then they left them behind, and they took canoes and stuff. And when they got there, they traded for horses to carry their packs and stuff. But the thing is that the horse had only gotten there, just within the last 50 to 100 years,
right,
before they got there. I mean, which did change the culture of these Indians completely.
Let me bring up something just by the way. Horses, and you mentioned mules.
Yes.
Mules are the product of a horse and a donkey.
Yes.
And so we have to consider that where did the donkey come from? And the donkey's not mentioned anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's mentioned in here too.
But I mean, no, I mean in history,
yeah.
The horses came, but what about the donkeys? Because there were mules, but I mean, but nobody talks about the donkeys. I mean, just
yes,
there's a history of the donkeys that's not the same as the horse.
Yep.
And they have been, forever still are pack animals.
Yep, exactly. Let's see. Well, anyway, going on with the horse, we got pictures of the horse here somewhere too. Yeah. Anyway, where we go? Okay, let me shrink that. We got some. So this is what really changed the Indians, is the fact that, look at that. Now you got this changed how they could move their stuff around. Somebody could ride, somebody could be pulled, and they could go from place to place pretty easily. Here's him with his war paint on his horse. They put symbols on their horses, feathers, war paint, bells and trim, well, I don't know, beads, things like that were on their horse. Here's other things they had. They decorated their horses pretty well. Now, these are older pictures, but the Indian ponies of old were only, they were descendants of the Spanish horses. The Spanish horses, they were bred down and kind of inbred, and they ended up with big heads and small bodies. The average horse is only about 14 hands. But until the white man came through and brought some bigger horses to breed in there again. But they weren't that big. They were small. Let's see. Warrior painted his horse in his favorite colors with handprints, different paint and symbols, everything from bars, squares, dots, the symbols to distinguish how many kills he had, or how his family was, or what, whatever he had for symbols and stuff. Might be horse tracks, crazy lines, things like that. The most prominent color of horse on the plains was the pinto. Believe it or not, the horses were decorated with eagle feathers, stuff like that. Anything they had around. Let's see, they used they used buffalo hair and horse hair to breed ropes, make saddles, sinew and rawhide to draw the saddles together that they made out of bones from elk. Grass or horsehair, or the padding of the the saddles was made for with grass, horsehair, or buffalo wool, and was used as a saddle homeward for trips, things like that. Harder pack saddles were made with bones or wood. Cottonwood was a favorite choice. Basically, and then made a frame of that, and they would cover it with blankets. Most of the bridles and things were made with horsehair until the white man came, and then they used, for the metal bridles and things like that. But other than that, until that point, that was all, I don't know if you guys know much about the horse. It was like a wrap around the nose, or a string through the mouth kind of thing. The cinches were made with buffalo and braiding, decorated with animal skins. A lot of wampum belts and things like that. They would carry shields, stuff like that, on their horses in the front to protect them from other Indian attacks, lances and spears, whatever he had. The Indian would be able to they were known for their horse skills. They could ride on and cover themselves on one side or the other and shoot their bow underneath their horse's neck. They were great horsemen. I don't think I got much. Well, there's buffalo, horse, and horse. And there's buffalo calves. Okay. And that is all I got on that.
Well, that last picture of the two Indians on the horses and the travois.
Yep.
There were a lot of horses in the background.
Oh yeah.
But to think that 100 years before, it wouldn't have been that way.
No.
With the amount of horses. So just pointing that out.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe I'm pointing out the obvious, but to some folks they could be like, "What?"
Well, and then that's the thing. In that 100 years, or 200, within 200 years, the horse populated, and of course, just like they did the plains, the buffalo increased, so did the horse. I mean, they had all that grass. The horses,
no predators.
Yeah, for the most part, they didn't have predators. They were fleet of foot. They grazed in herds, and they could outrun everything. Hackamore, that's what I'm thinking of. I know it slipped my mind, Lucky. Thank you, Hackamore.
What?
He was talking about a hackamore, which is like a thing that goes over their nose and under their chin and not in their mouth.
I got you.
We call it a hack there, yeah. So anyway, that was the whole thing with the horse. Well, without the horse, or the buffalo, these people, really would have. Can you imagine the white man getting here, and the Indians not having horses already? It would have been pretty much a. Look at these people, they're all on foot. They can't run away from us. They would have been just sitting ducks.
Chase them down in no time.
Yeah, it'd have been even worse. Yeah, exactly. So where are we going tonight? Thank you everybody for listening to my rambling horse stories and buffalo chases.
And the buffalo.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, I've pulled the buffalo card several times, and how much the buffalo was so very much revered by all the Indian, all native peoples, and the buffalo is considered a giver. Was put here with specifically the purpose of being killed and eaten and used for hide,
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, like I said, it's the Great Spirit. They gave reverence to the Great Spirit for, through the buffalo, because that was everything to them.
Exactly.
You know, you get the most meat out of that, you get the most everything. It was probably, I hate to say it, but I think the buffalo would have been like the easiest to in a way to kill off too, because they kind of don't do much. You know, of course they could stampede and kill you, but you know, it'd be harder to, you know, hunt a deer on horseback, I think, because you can't outrun a deer because it just moves too fast, or an elk. And you got to lay in wait for that deer or elk. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, the way to think of it.
The hunting and the deer well, they do move in herds, but not necessarily like the buffalo did, you know?
No,
I mean, I understand out west that the antelope travel in large herds.
yes.
And I've traveled along the interstate. I noticed that they had like antelope fences or something in areas to where when they'd migrate, they'd actually have them go under the interstates.
Yep.
So they wouldn't get killed.
Well, yeah,
they would migrate by the hundreds or thousands.
well, we got elk out here, and you know, when they go running. I mean, yeah, a bunch of them come through and they're running, but boy, I seen them elk, they just jump a fence like it's nothing and
Yep.
keep right on running, and they're doing, you know, 25, 30 miles an hour. And yeah, and or like deer or the antelope, holy cow. You know, I can get pretty close to an antelope with my vehicle and it'll stand right there and kind of look at me. But the moment I open that door, whew, they're gone.
And I mean, and they can literally leap straight up.
Yes.
At like 10 feet, they're like boing. One of the most amazing, you know, deer can do the same thing, but the antelope are a little better at this jumping up thing. Oh my God, when we were out west that time, to watch them jump over the fences and stuff, I was like, holy mackerel.
Well, the thing is too is the Indians didn't hunt the antelope very much because the meat of the antelope wasn't that great. Remember, the antelope is kind of part of the goat family. And so, you know how goat taste, you know, it's good if you can skin it out right and wash it off or whatever. But a lot of times if you get that, it can have a goaty taste to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I read about that somewhere. It says that, you know, they avoided that eating antelope if they could, just because of the, you know,
but not only
everything
that,
else
was a
was
lot
better.
harder to kill because them puppies don't stand still for nothing, you know.
Oh no, yeah.
And because they are the type that jump and run and all that, their muscles are a lot more you know, sinewy kind of thing, where the, you know, the buffalo didn't run all the time. They grazed, and so, you know, the meat was a lot different. But anyway,
okay,
yeah.
Where am I going while I'm doing this?
All right, I'm sorry. We started there, and I found the page. We are American Indian Fairy Tales.
American.
Is that the right one, Dave? That's the one we're on, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, hang on. I gotta find it. Hang on.
It's in the first book. I mean, the first, you know, section.
Okay, I gotta find the folder here.
There's a couple of stories in this one. It's the shortest. Is called White Hawk the Lazy. And there's another story that's just past this one, but it's a two-parter, and it's the Magic Feather. And if we only do one tonight, I think we might just put the Magic Feather on tap for next week because it's an interesting story.
What's it called again? American Indian Fairy Tales, right?
Yeah, American Indian Fairy Tales, Snowbird, the Water Tiger, etc. 1907.
Yeah, okay. Got it. It's got to look a little bit closer sometimes.
And I think it's page 65, or is that a 3? Hang on. Oops, come on. Page 65, White Hawk.
All right, I got it. I just got to get it here. And blow it up a little bit. And we're good to rock and roll. I'm pretty good at finding stuff. It's just got to give me the information. There we go. Look at that. Give it another smoosh there. There we go.
All right, I got my page open too. And just so I can control scrolling in case.
Yeah.
But let me get a drink here and we'll start this story.
All righty.
Want to thank you all for showing up tonight and partaking of the stories. We, believe it or not, we spend a lot of time reading these stories and looking over things and trying to do history. And we hope that, those of you who listen and tune in, that you get something out of this. So here we go. White Hawk the Lazy. White Hawk was known as the laziest boy in the tribe. When his father set his nets, even on the coldest days in winter, he had to do it alone, for White Hawk would never help him either to carry the net or to cut the ice. He neither hunted nor fished. He took no part in the games of the young men, and he refused to wait upon his parents until his name became a reproach. His father and mother were deeply grieved by his conduct, for they themselves were industrious and frugal. They did not, like many of their tribe, return from the wintering grounds to feast and be idle, but built themselves a lodge in the forest where they laid store for the future. At last, they determined to try to shame White Hawk out of his laziness. So one night, when he had refused to go and fetch water for them, the father said, "Ah, my son, one who is afraid to go to the river after dark will never kill the redhead." Now, it was the ambition of every Indian boy to kill the redhead. Though his parents did not know it, White Hawk had always believed that he would accomplish it, and he often sat and thought of different ways in which it might be done, for he was strong despite his laziness. He made no answer, but went at once to bed. The next morning, he asked his mother to make him some new moccasins of deerskin, while he cut some arrows. He made only 4, which he put into a shabby quiver and laid beside his moccasins, ready to take with him in the morning. He rose before daylight and, without waking either his father or his mother, put on his moccasins, took his bow and quiver, and set out, determined to kill the redhead before he returned. He did not know which way to go, so as soon as it was light, he shot an arrow into the air and followed the direction of its flight. He traveled all day. Towards night, he was tired and hungry, for he had brought no food with him, and he found but only a few acorns in the forest. To his surprise, he saw a fat deer with an arrow in its side lying across the path. It was the arrow he had shot that morning. He did not pull it out, but cut off as much meat as he wanted to eat and left the rest for the coyotes. He slept in a hollow tree all night. Early the next morning, he shot another arrow into the air to find out in what direction to go that day. And at night, he found another deer that had been pierced by this arrow. Thus it happened every day for 4 days. But as he had not withdrawn any of the arrows, on the 5th day, he had none to use and so was without food. He was very hungry, for he had long since left the woods and there were no nuts or berries on the prairie. He lay down thinking he might as well die there as elsewhere, for he was suffering great pain from hunger. It was not long before he heard a hollow, rumbling sound that seemed to be underground. He stood up and looking around, saw a broad beaten path leading across the prairie. An old woman was walking along this path, thumping the ground with a stick at every step. He went nearer and was terribly frightened, for he discovered that she was a witch, known throughout the country as the little old woman who makes war. She wore a mantle made entirely of women's scalps. Her staff, which was a stout hickory stick, was ornamented with a string of toes and bills of birds of all kinds. At every stroke of the staff, they fluttered and sang, each in its own fashion, and the discord was horrible. White Hawk followed her, creeping along in the high grass as to hide himself until he saw her lodge, which was on the shore of the lake. She entered, took off her mantle, and shook it several times. At every shake, the scalps uttered loud shrieks of laughter, in which the old witch joined. Presently she came out and, without seeming to look, walked directly up to White Hawk. She told him that she knew all about his determination to kill the redhead and that she would help him. Many young men have thought about killing him, she said, but you are the only one who has set out to do it. She insisted upon his going to her lodge to spend the night, and he went, although he knew that he would not be able to sleep in such a place. She told him to lie down and, taking out a comb, began to comb his hair, which in a few moments became long and glossy like a woman's. She tied it with a magical hair string and gave him a woman's dress of fine, soft skin, a necklace, and brooches of silver, and many strings of wampum. Then she painted his face red and yellow, not forgetting to put on some love powder. Last of all, she brought a silver bowl for him and slipped a blade of scented sword grass into his girdle. She told him that the redhead lived on an island in the center of the lake, on the shore of which her lodge was built. On the morrow, White Hawk should go down to the water and begin dipping the silver bowl into the lake and drinking from it. The Indians who were with the redhead would see him, and supposing him to be a woman, would come over in their canoes, and each would wish to make her his wife. He was to say, "No, I will only marry the redhead, and he must bring his own canoe for me, for I have traveled a long way in order to be his wife." When the redhead should receive the news, he would cross in his canoe and take White Hawk to the island. The witch loaded him with presents to give in the event of a marriage, in which case he was to be on the watch for an opportunity to kill the redhead by cutting off his head with the spear of scented sword grass. White Hawk rose the next morning, put on the women's garments that had been given him, went down to the lake, and began dipping water with the silver bowl. Presently, many canoes were put out from the island. They were driven swiftly to the spot where he stood, and the men strove with one another in offers of marriage. Whitehawk acted as the witch told him a woman should under the circumstances. To all their entreaties he replied, I have come a great way to see the redhead, whom I am resolved to marry. If he wants me, let him come in his own canoe to take me to his wigwam. The message was taken to Redhead, who immediately crossed the lake in his canoe. As it neared the shore, Whitehawk saw that its framework was of live rattlesnakes, who thrust out their heads and hissed and rattled as he stepped into the boat. The redhead spoke to them, and they quieted down, as dogs at the word of their master. When they landed, the redhead went straight to his wigwam, and the marriage was performed. Then a feast was spread. The presents were given, and Whitehawk waited his opportunity. By and by, Redhead's mother, who had been watching the bride closely, said to her husband, That is no woman our son has married. No woman ever looked out of her eyes like that. Her husband was very angry, and Whitehawk, who had overheard the conversation, jumped up and said, I have been insulted, and by my husband's people, I cannot live here. I will return at once to my nation. And he ran out of the wigwam, followed by the guest and by the redhead, who motioned them to leave him. Whitehawk went down to the shore and made pretense of getting into a canoe. When the redhead laid a hand upon him and sorrowfully begged him to wait at least a little time, he turned back and sat down, when the redhead threw himself at his wife's feet and put his head into her lap. Whitehawk lost not a moment in drawing out the blade of sword grass and cutting off his head at a single stroke. He then plunged into the water and swam across the lake with the head in his hand. He had scarcely reached the shore when he saw the redhead's followers come down with torches in search of him and his wife. He heard their shrieks when they found the headless body, and so lost no time in making his way to the witch's lodge, whether they would not be likely to follow him. The witch received him with great joy. She told him that he must give her a little piece of the scalp for herself, but he might take the rest home. He was anxious to return, so she gave him a partridge to offer the spirit of the earth in case he should meet him on the way. As Whitehawk crossed the prairie, he heard a great rumbling and the cracking sound, and the earth split and opened in front of him. He threw the partridge into the crack, and it was closed immediately, so they passed over it in safety. On reaching home, he found that his parents had fasted and mourned for him as dead, for it had been gone a year. Many young men had come to them and had said, See, I am your son. Until when Whitehawk did return, they would not even look at them. He threw himself at their feet and told them that he had killed the redhead. They paid no attention to him. And the young men of the tribe to whom he repeated the story laughed in his face. He went outside the camp and brought back the head. Then indeed his parents rejoiced, for they knew that he would be admitted at once to the company of warriors for having rid them of so great an enemy. While they all wondered how one who was so lazy could have become so great a brave, he told them why he had acted as he did before he left the village. He was so strong that he had been afraid of breaking things, and so did not dare to touch them. He took hold of some fishing nets, and as he turned them over in his fingers, they snapped in many places. But now that he was a man, his strength would be useful to him and to the tribe. He could clear the forest of fallen trees and carry some to the streams where he could throw them so that his people might go from one side to the other in safety. Thereafter, he was not known as White Hawk the Lazy, but as the Strong Man. And that's the story of White Hawk the Lazy. Are you muted?
So there we go.
Okay.
I
So
did.
was that an interesting story?
It was a very interesting story. I like it.
So next week, we're going to read the next one in line from that, which is a two-parter about the magic feather. So
feather.
Yeah, so y'all just, you know, you can put that in your pipes and smoke it.
Yeah, if y'all like those stories, I have the PDFs. Just send me an email and I will send that right out to you. And you can read along with us or read it all. There's a whole mess of stories there. So Isby's in the house. Hey, Isby, how you doing? I always like the readings about giants, Regine Hutchinson says.
Actually, cool. The next story, The Magic Feather, has to do with giants.
Well, there you go. Cool.
And giants and men. And it's an interesting story.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about giants. Yes, Jargo's in the house.
The Magic Feather. We'll have to bookmark that.
There you go.
In my head.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Let's see who else is here. Isby. I just get late. I had a long week, people. Long week, a lot of hours. Ready for a card?
I got her ready.
Yep.
And the card for tonight is Crow.
Crow. All right.
Crow is law.
Law. Okay.
Crow, are you calling so I may know the secrets of balance within my soul? Or are you sending your sacred call just to remind me of universal laws? There is a medicine story that tells of Crow's fascination with her own shadow. She kept looking at it, scratching at it, pecking at it until her shadow woke up and became alive. Then Crow's shadow ate her. Crow is dead Crow now. Dead Crow is the left-handed guardian. If you look deeply into Crow's eye, you will have found the gateway to the supernatural. Crow knows the unknowable mysteries of creation and is the keeper of all sacred law. Since Crow is the keeper of sacred law, Crow can bend the laws of the physical universe and shapeshift. This art includes doubling or bending in two places at one time, being in two places at one time, consciously taking on another physical form and becoming the fly on the wall, to observe what is happening far away. The Europeans that came to Turtle Island were named the boat people by Slow Turtle. Even with the knowledge of the alchemy possessed by certain boat people, none had ever seen the powerful shape-shifting of shamans who utilized crow medicine. Many boat people were frightened by what appeared to be animals coming into their camps or dwellings to discern their medicines. Crow medicine people are masters of illusion. All sacred texts are under the protection of Crow. Creator's book of law or book of seals is bound in crow feathers. Crow feathers tell of spirit made flesh. Crow is also the protector of the Oglala, or ancient records. The sacred law belts or wampum belts, beaded by native women long before the boat people came, contain knowledge of the Great Spirit's laws. So wampum belts are sacred and they contain the Great Spirit's laws and are kept in the black lodges, the lodges of the women. The law which states that all things are born of women is signified by Crow. Children are taught to behave according to the rules of a particular culture. More orthodox religion systems create a mandate concerning acceptable behavior within the context of worldly affairs. Do this, do that, and you will go to heaven. Do this and that, and you'll go to hell. Different formulas for salvation are demanded by each true faith. That's a very interesting statement right there. So human law is not the same as sacred law. More so than any other medicine, Crow sees that the physical world and even the spiritual world, as humanity interprets them, are an illusion. There are billions of worlds. Pay attention. There are billions of worlds. There are an infinitude of creatures. Great Spirit is within all. If an individual obeys Crow's perfect laws as given by the Creator, then at death, he or she dies a good medicine death, going on to the next incarnation with a clear memory of his or her past. Crow is an omen of change. Crow lives in the void and has no sense of time. The ancient chiefs tell us that Crow sees simultaneously the three fates, past, present, and future. Crow merges light and darkness, seeing both inner and outer reality. If Crow medicine appears in your card spread, you must pause and reflect on how you see the laws of the Great Spirit. They want me to read that again. If Crow medicine appears in your card spread, you must pause and reflect on how you see the laws of the Great Spirit. A lot of times we kind of forget and just, daily life kind of ruins us. And sometimes we just need to take pause for the cause. And we reflect on how you see the laws of the Great Spirit in relation to the laws of humanity. Crow medicine signifies a firsthand knowledge of a higher order of right and wrong than indicated by the laws created in human culture. With Crow medicine, you speak in a powerful voice when addressing issues that for you seem to be out of harmony or out of balance, out of whack, or simply unjust. Remember that Crow looks at the world with first one eye and then the other cross-eyed. In the Mayan culture, cross-eyeds had the privilege and duty of looking into the future. You must put aside your fear of being a voice in the wilderness and caw the shots as you see them. Put aside your fear of being a voice in the wilderness. As you learn to allow your personal integrity to be your guide, your sense of feeling alone will vanish. Your personal will can then emerge so that you will stand in your truth. The prime path of the true Crow people says to be mindful of your opinions and actions. Be willing to walk your talk, speak your truth, know your life's mission, and balance past, present, and the future in the now. Shape shift that old reality and become your future self. That's an interesting sentence. Shape shift that old reality and become your future self. Allow the bending of physical laws to aid in creating the shape-shifted world of peace. That's the message for this week.
Huh. Interesting.
Shape shift your world to be your future self. That's an interesting statement.
Yeah, I like that. Shape shift your world. You know, and that's the thing. Your world is what you make it to be. And a lot of people, they tend to make their world and then live in the and say there's something wrong, but they're not willing to make it into something else.
There, that, oh, there's not enough food. Oh, there's folks that I know, and they're all looking at the negative. There was a gentleman who told me, he goes, the price of tomatoes has just gone sky high. And because there's no fertilizer because of the Russians and because of this and that, and because of this and that, there weren't as many tomatoes this year. And now you can't find ketchup in the stores. And I was like, what? So today I was in the store and I went by and I went, holy crap, there's a whole slew of ketchup. There are gallons of ketchup on the shelf. And I was like, now, by this person's thinking, now I don't know, maybe he went to Walmart and they didn't have any ketchup. Well, okay, I go to the local Dollar General, but there was plenty of ketchup. And a couple of months ago, I had ran out of ketchup. So I bought a couple of big bottles just because,
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I got enough ketchup to last me. What's this deal? But so there are folks who, so he was just focused on the fact that there's not going to be any ketchup. And the little packs of ketchup that they give out at Hardee's or whatever for your French fries, they weren't going to give them out anymore. And they was not going to be. And I was like, holy mackerel, and everything's going to come to a screaming halt because of ketchup and because of tomatoes but the reason was because we don't have the fertilizer. Now there's a good bunch of truth in that. But then I told him, I said, driving between Thomasville and Moultrie, about 2 weeks ago now, was a huge acre or two of tomatoes that a farmer was growing. And you could pull over and go and pick your own tomatoes. And I don't know how much it was, but I had to get to an appointment, so I couldn't stop. But I mean, so wait a minute. There are people who are growing tomatoes, maybe the market and maybe this or that, but hang on now, the world is not coming to an end because we don't have any tomatoes. There aren't, calm down. So with that said, too many people focus only on the negative of things.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You shape your own world, and to this guy, it seemed like he was listening to the news, and they said, "Oh, we're going to run out of ketchup because of the tomato shortage," and oh my God, there's no ketchup. But you didn't go check your world out. You didn't shop around. You just said, "Oh, they said there was no tomatoes, and now there's no tomatoes." In his head, there's no tomatoes and there's no ketchup.
And it was because there isn't any fertilizer. And the nitrogen and the things that we got from from different places in Ukraine or whatever, so we don't have the fertilizer. So it started with fertilizer and then it went to the tomatoes. So, now
Yeah,
there is a shortage of fertilizer, but there are a lot of horses and cows and chickens and a lot of other ways to get fertilizer.
this is true.
I mean, and chickens got a lot, chicken fertilizer is one of the best. I've used it over the years in my garden myself because I've raised chickens. So, but anyway, but it's the idea though that in the world, something will catch people.
Yep.
And I'm just using this as the example, but it started with fertilizer and then it goes to this and then it ends up there's no ketchup in the stores and you'll never be able to get free packets of ketchup again for your fries. I mean, I was like, oh please. His story just got to the point where I was like, seriously? I mean,
World is over because there's no fertilizer, and that
and if there was a shortage of little ketchup packets, that you couldn't eat your French fries without ketchup. I mean, oh my, I can't. French fries will never be the same.
I know, and that's sad.
So it's a shame, but there are people that things like that will slow people down.
I know.
And it'll catch them. It'll catch them. Catch them. Hey, catch up, buddy.
Ketchup,
But it'll catch them in a state and it interferes with their future.
Absolutely. See, this is the mind rut we're in. Think positive, people. We're not running out of ketchup. Just that store that you went to ran out of ketchup. And there'll be more on the shelf on Monday.
And if there is a ketchup shortage, we'll get over it. I mean, Here's the thing. If there ain't none, well, then there ain't none. I mean,
so if you need
people
ketchup,
are so used to having everything that they want. And so there are times when I've gone to the store and my favorite, whatever it may be, ain't there. They're out of it. So what do? I just go, oh, well, I'll wait until they get some more. And if we don't get any more, well, it was good while it lasted.
If you like ketchup, go to town, buy yourself 2 bottles right now. But and you'll have plenty of ketchup till the next time. Right?
Or whatever. I mean, but since I live out here in the country and I usually buy, I go to the store once a week, maybe, or once every 10 days. Now that I've been going to the doctor and such once a week, I go right by the dollar store, but I try to get by. So I buy 2 gallons of milk. And if one goes sour a little bit, I share it with the dog and the cats. Nothing ever goes to waste. There's a loaf of bread in the freezer, and I got one that I use. So, those of us who live in the country that can't get back and forth to a store really quick, we plan ahead. You know what I mean?
That is for sure.
We plan ahead. So, and I've been doing this for years. So I buy a week's worth or more. And if it's easy to buy one and I'm out, I buy 2.
Yeah.
I buy one to replace the one that I just emptied and one for in the future.
That's what I do. I'm on my 10-day right now, and I don't get a chance to go to the store for 10 days. So I make sure I have plenty. And for 10 days, I can't really go shopping. I can't do anything. So there you go. I know exactly how that goes.
Mine is self-imposed, but still, I'm doing it on this 10-day cycle kind of thing. I've gotten used to it, where other people buy for 2 or 3 days in advance. And it's like, what?
I know. You gonna have a show after this?
Yeah, I think I will. I got coffee in me, and
Good deal. You'll be up for a couple hours. Good deal. Well, everybody, I know that
we're gonna cut it short before 2 hours.
yeah, exactly. I'm tired. I'm on call, so I'm gonna hit the sack. I got tomorrow to go, and then I'm off on Thursday when I'm going to be on Wayne's show. Check him out, Wayne Steiger. But anyway, I'll be on there on Thursday at noon. So catch me there. Got a lot of good stuff I'm going to talk about. Haven't been on Wayne's show except when we had a big group, but then I had Wayne on my show. So anyway, it's going to be a good fun time. This Saturday, I got Trina and Courtney on. It's going to be a really fun show to get the two girls together. A lot of female feminine energy there pumping through the screen. There'll be so a lot of fun ahead. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Thank you, David, for being on, and another good show in the bag. We're rocking and rolling with these. Next week we'll bring you some more stories and some more good history information. Notice I kept it light. No killing of tribes and poor me and poor them.
Massacres.
Yeah, geez, I every now and then I just got to take a break from that and tell a good enlightening story without all the depression. But thank you everybody for coming tonight.
Love you.
Desert Rose, I see Desert Rose and Isby are in the house. But anyway, everybody, I had a lot of people stuck around for the whole show. Thank you so much. Go out and enjoy the day. Do something nice for your neighbor. Tis the season for giving. If nothing else, give them a smile, give them a wave,
A helping hand.
A helping hand. Yes.
Cheers.
Doesn't cost anything. With that, be the frequency you want to receive, everyone. Love you all. Peace, everybody. There we go. Another show.